Hello, this is Mel Thompson, and this is a podcast and a series of podcasts about political risk. Today I'll be discussing China and addressing the obvious. The major story that has been coming out of China that has kept many foreign direct investors on edge is the South China Sea. From the initial back and forth to freedom of navigation moves by the United States to the decision in favor of the Philippines over China, the direct content of the behavior that China is exhibiting is at odds with addressing and lowering political risk. The content of their behavior, meaning the policies, the actual content, the written word, what is expected, is not being adhered to in a logical fashion. By this, I mean that the Chinese government is not a group of people who are irrational actors. These are very intelligent people. They are very much rational actors. Whether or not you like their positions on human rights, which I absolutely do not like, or other issues, including the environment, is not the topic here. The topic is, are they in fact rational enough to do things that will not essentially put their economy in the tank? I believe they are. But recently, they are not addressing the obvious political risks to keep the economy growing. China is a productive and fine foreign direct investment target, yet the instability over the South China Sea has given pause to expanded foreign direct investment. It is this uncertainty that has contributed to weak growth in China, and the numbers prove that. The numbers from July were atrocious. This is only one issue that is not being addressed. This is only one obvious issue that is not being addressed. The lack of content as far as doing the obvious. You're not going to own the entire South China Sea. China knows this, but they continue to go down this road that continues to make people skittish and make foreign direct investors think twice before they expand. No one is going to expand in a country where you don't know from one minute to another whether or not there's going to be a shooting match between Chinese vessels and American vessels, Chinese vessels and Philippine vessels, and so on and so forth. There are many countries involved in the South China Sea dispute, and China and the United States are probably the two, without question, they are the two most powerful. China's actions are not helping their economy because people are starting to pull back, and rightfully so, because we don't know where it's going. They're not addressing the obvious issue here. The obvious issue is following the law of the sea treaty, adhering to it, and then not being the local bully saying we own the South China Sea. You don't. The other issue, the other lack of addressing the obvious, is the fact that China is not doing enough to mitigate the obvious problems when it comes to natural disasters. Now, we all know that there is a problem environmentally in China because they don't do much, if anything at all, to try to control pollution. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. Below that are other issues, environmental issues they don't try to mitigate or plan for, that are also causing foreign direct investors to not want to expand there. Case in point is the fact that they've had summer floods in China for as long as China has been around. Yet they have done very little, particularly this year, to mitigate the damages that these floods cause, and the price tag on the 2016 lack of addressing this issue was $35 billion. As always, a political risk may be a lack of action as well as an action. In the case of the floods, it was a lack of planning that caused the losses that were completely avoidable, or at least they could have been a lot lower. China is at a crossroads where they can be growing as a superpower economically, or they can be a stagnant superpower economically. There is not a lack of desire on the part of foreign direct investors to continue and expand in China. What exists as a stumbling block is uncertainty in addressing the obvious. For example, China must know that it is not going to be able to maintain the growth levels that it has in the past if it continues to not attract foreign direct investment. It also must know that it's not going to continue to attract foreign direct investment at the same level it did several years ago when investors are looking at the South China Sea as a potential war zone, not a real out and out world war. What we're talking about is a miscalculation, a mistake, an error by somebody who is on a Chinese naval vessel who felt emboldened that they may get a medal for firing on a U.S. ship. The only thing that person is going to get is death. And they are also going to be causing a load of problems for the Chinese government and the economy if that situation does happen at some point, which is possible. And if it does happen at some point, it's going to take a lot of diplomacy to repair that relationship. But during the time where things are starting to cool down, there's going to be a lot of people who are very nervous economically. And if they think their numbers are bad from this past July, the numbers were horrible in China as far as growth, that if they think that they were bad in July, wait till something like this happens. The Chinese government actually did a rational thing. They put out a statement saying, don't worry about the numbers. In July, things are not as bad as they may seem. Numbers don't lie. They are as bad as they seem. But they caused it themselves by getting people who are likely foreign direct investors and companies that want to be in China and expand there, getting them to the point where they're starting to pull back and not even going there in some cases. Why? Because China is not addressing the obvious. Addressing the obvious once again. Adhere to the Law of the Sea Treaty and realize you don't own the South China Sea. Do something about the environment in that country and be proactive when it comes to planning and mitigating natural disasters. These are very simple and very basic things that the Chinese government keeps repeatedly ignoring. And because of this, foreign direct investors are starting to say to themselves, we're making some money, but we don't want to lose any money by going any further. This has been Mel Thompson.